Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank Senator Capito for bringing up the question of ozone. There are two things I find frustrating about this new rule. Jurisdictions that have made progress in actually lowering the ozone level are now being rewarded with the back of the hand and being found in non-attainment after having made progress. Also, so many areas, including perhaps you're familiar with DeSoto County in Mississippi, which is a suburban county of Memphis. There's nothing that the activities in DeSoto County have done to raise the ozone level. It comes from the west and it comes from the metropolitan area, and yet development and job creation are being stifled in this suburban county through no fault of their own, and there's very little they can do to prevent it since the ozone comes from someplace else. So thank you, Senator Capito, for mentioning that. Mr. Braceras, let me preface my question with a fairly lengthy beginning. The President recently issued an executive order. It expands the area where federal agencies will be required to follow floodplain management. It expands it from the 100-year floodplain to the 500-year floodplain. Currently, there are projects to raise roads to above the 100-year flood to address the risk. Now, that will not be enough. There will be increased costs because of limitations on building in a floodplain. There will also be costs for mitigating any impacts to the floodplain and complying with, quote, zero rise policies that say a project cannot have the effect of increasing flooding. The rule will be used by federal agencies overseeing new infrastructure projects in transportation, energy, housing, and water supply. Agencies will be required to choose one of three approaches when building or completing maintenance to infrastructure. One, use the best available climate science. Or two, build 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. There's a 1% annual chance of flooding in that instance. Or three, build to the 500-year flood elevation. There's a 0.2% annual chance of flooding in that instance. The rule could have significant impacts to the distribution of federal highway aid, U.S. DOT Tiger grants, HUD CDBG grants, federal loan guarantees, FEMA flood insurance, and floodplain management and disaster response programs. What impacts related to cost would your member agencies face, Mr. Braceras, if they were required to build or repair federal highways 2 feet above the current 100-year flood elevation?
Senator, I always struggle with specific answers being given to states in terms of how to solve issues. Everything that we do, we need to evaluate the risks, the benefits, and the costs associated with that, and make strategic decisions on what's best for the taxpayers, their safety, and bring that all together. Now, Utah's a relatively dry state, but believe it or not, we have areas that are dry washes that have been defined as navigable waterways and require extensive permitting in order to make decisions. I would be concerned about the ability for states to make the proper decisions for infrastructure preservation. So if we're going to have to touch a piece of roadway or bridge, and if as soon as we touch it, we're going to need to bring it up to a new standard, well, that keeps states, municipalities from doing the right treatment at the right time, and thereby cost taxpayers more in the long run, and maybe create unsafe conditions. So every time we make a decision, we should evaluate it in the context of the benefit cost in the larger picture, not just regarding a specific resource.
And when you mention costs, that's cost for mitigation, for a change design or change location, or for different or more expensive materials. Would anyone else on the panel like to jump in and help us understand this issue better? Mr. Reardon.
Senator, we have significant concerns on kind of the broader context of obviously this, along with the waters of the U.S. regulations that are being promulgated. In our mind, frankly, it's similar to the discussion we just had on ozone, where NAM has put together a study that shows the ozone regulation would be the most expensive rule ever promulgated within the federal government, costing a potential $2 trillion. key concern is I don't have the facts behind what this proposed regulation would cost in terms of floodplain. But again, it's a question of, as I would call from a manufacturing standpoint, what problem is it we're trying to solve here, and is this the most cost-effective way of doing it?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.